What if I told you that in one country, students can legally leave school at 15, while in another, they're required to stay until 18? And that's just the beginning of the differences. I'm talking about the American and Australian school systems. Two English-speaking, developed nations with education structures so different they might as well be on different planets. In the next 10 minutes, you'll discover 11 fundamental differences that shape millions of students' lives, from how schools are funded to what students actually learn, and why these systems produce such different outcomes. By the end of this video, you'll understand not just what makes these systems different, but why those differences matter for students, families, and entire societies. If you're curious about global education systems and want more deep dives like this, hit subscribe. We're breaking down complex topics with real data and stories you won't find elsewhere. Let's start with something simple. When do students actually go to school? Picture this. A teenager in Melbourne named Chris starts his final year of school in late January, settling into classes while enjoying the tail end of Australian summer. Meanwhile, his cousin in Boston won't begin the school year until September, an 8-month offset that creates real challenges for international families trying to coordinate gap years or university applications. This isn't just about weather preference. The Australian academic year runs from late January through December, divided into 4 terms with 2-week breaks between each term. The American system runs from August or September through May or June, split into 2 semesters with 1 long summer break. According to a 2022 OECD education report, this structural difference affects everything from standardized testing schedules to mental health patterns. Australian students experience more frequent, shorter breaks, which research suggests helps reduce burnout. American students face a longer summer break, which studies have shown can lead to learning loss, particularly for students from lower-income families who have less access to enrichment activities. The timing of these breaks influences not just academics, but family vacation planning, summer job opportunities, and even retail patterns across entire nations. It's a reminder that something as basic as the calendar shapes educational experiences in profound ways. But the calendar is just the surface level. The real differences start with who actually controls what happens inside these schools. Here's where things get interesting. When a Texas school district wanted to update its history curriculum in 2021, it sparked intense local school board debates, community meetings, and even protests. Parents, teachers, and residents fought over which historical events would be emphasized and how controversial topics would be taught. That same year, Australian schools in Perth and Sydney, cities 2,000 miles apart, were simultaneously implementing identical national standards with minimal local variation. This illustrates a fundamental difference. America has over 13,000 independent school districts, each with its own elected school board making curriculum decisions. Australia has a national curriculum overseen by ACARA, the Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority, established in 2008. Every Australian student learns the same core content, regardless of which state or territory they live in. Research from the Brookings Institution in 2023 shows this creates vastly different equity outcomes. In America, a child's education quality can vary dramatically based on their zip code. A student in a wealthy Massachusetts suburb might have access to advanced computer science courses and multiple AP options, while a student in rural Mississippi might attend a school without a full-time physics teacher. Australia's centralized approach ensures that whether you're in a tiny school in the outback or a large urban comprehensive school, you're working from the same curriculum framework. The trade-off? Local communities have less say in tailoring education to their specific cultural contexts or values. To understand why this governance structure matters so much, we need to look at how schools actually get their funding, and the disparities might surprise you. Let me give you a concrete example. 2 public schools exist just 30 miles apart in suburban Philadelphia. One receives $16,000 per student annually. The other receives $24,000 per student. The difference? Property values and local tax revenue. In America, roughly 45% of school funding comes from local property taxes, according to the National Center for Education Statistics 2023 data. This means wealthy neighborhoods with expensive homes generate significantly more revenue for their schools than lower-income areas. The remaining funding comes from state and federal sources, but those rarely equalize the gap. Now compare this to Australia. Schools in rural Queensland and urban Brisbane receive baseline funding from the federal and state governments, about 80% of total funding. The Gonski reforms, implemented progressively since 2011, introduced needs-based allocation, meaning schools with more disadvantaged students receive additional funding to address those challenges. The numbers tell the story. Per student spending in America ranges from around $7,000 in some districts to over $28,000 in others. In Australia, while private schools exist and charge fees, public schools maintain more consistent per-student funding across regions. What does this mean practically? An American school in a poor district might struggle to afford updated textbooks or maintain building facilities, while a wealthy district 20 minutes away has new STEM labs and one-to-one device programs. Australian public schools still face resource challenges, but the baseline is more consistent. This funding mechanism creates educational opportunities that mirror residential segregation patterns in America, while Australia's model aims for, though doesn't always achieve, more equitable baseline resources. These funding differences manifest in surprising ways when we look at what subject students actually take. Imagine you're a student approaching your final years of high school. In Sydney, you're a Year 11 student choosing 6 subjects from dozens of options, maybe physics, chemistry, advanced mathematics, English, French, and visual arts. You know these choices will determine not just what you study, but whether you can even apply to your desired university program. Meanwhile, in America, a high school junior is likely taking a state-mandated mix: English literature, Algebra 2, or pre-calculus, U.S. history, biology or chemistry, plus a couple of electives. There's less specialization but broader exposure across subject areas. Australian students typically study 6 to 7 subjects in their senior years with deep specialization. American students average 7 to 8 classes covering breadth. Here's why this matters. The Australian Tertiary Admission Rank System, ADR, calculates university admission solely from your final year subject performance in your chosen subjects. If you want to study engineering, you'd better have taken the right math and science subjects in year 11 and 12. The American system maintains flexibility longer. You could be an English major who took basic math or a future doctor who loved theater class. But this flexibility comes with a potential cost: less depth in your chosen field before university. Neither approach is inherently better. They reflect different philosophies. Australia says, specialize early and go deep. America says, stay well-rounded and decide later. Both have merit. Both have critics. This specialization directly affects how students are actually assessed and tested. Walk into a Los Angeles high school in April, and you'll find something striking. 6 weeks of instruction time dedicated to SAT and ACT preparation, state-mandated testing, and practice exams. Teachers adjust their curriculum, students attend test prep sessions, and anxiety levels spike. Now visit a Brisbane school that same month. Students might spend 3 days across 1 week taking NAPLAN tests, the National Assessment Program, literacy, and numeracy. Then they return to normal instruction. These tests happen only in years 3, 5, 7, and 9, and they're not required for graduation. Here's the data. A 2023 Stanford study found American students spend 20 to 25 hours annually taking standardized tests, not counting preparation time. Australian students spend 8 to 10 hours on NAPLAN. In America, these tests often determine graduation eligibility, teacher evaluations, and school funding. In Australia, NAPLAN results are used diagnostically to identify where schools and systems need improvement, not to punish individual students or schools. The SAT and ACT scores open college doors for American students, making them high-stakes individual assessments. Australian students take no standardized test for university admission. Instead, their ADR score comes from their actual course grades in year 12. This creates fundamentally different classroom cultures. American teachers face pressure to teach to the test. Australian teachers focus on subject mastery without the same testing pressure. The takeaway? High-stakes testing culture dominates American education, shaping what gets taught and how. Australia treats standardized tests as system-level checkpoints rather than individual student gatekeepers. The way schools measure success also changes how they handle students who struggle academically or have disabilities. When a Denver student was identified with dyslexia in 3rd grade, her parents found themselves navigating a complex system. They requested an IEP, an individualized education program, which triggered a formal evaluation process. The school had legal deadlines to meet, specific services to provide, and documentation requirements. If the parents disagreed with the plan, they had the right to legal mediation or due process hearings. Compare this to a similar student in Melbourne. When teachers noticed reading difficulties, the school's learning support team conducted assessments and began interventions without formal legal frameworks. Support was provided based on need, coordinated through the school's internal processes. In America, special education is governed by IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which guarantees services as legal rights. About 14% of American students receive special education services under this framework, according to the National Center for Education Statistics 2024 data. Parents have enforceable rights, schools must provide accommodations, and lawyers are sometimes involved when disputes arise. Australia provides disability support through adjustments under the Disability Standards for Education 2005. The approach is less formalized, more flexible, and relies less on legal mechanisms. Schools are required to make reasonable adjustments, but what counts as reasonable can be interpreted more broadly. What's the impact? The American system offers stronger legal protections and clear procedures, but it creates significant administrative burden for schools and can be intimidating for families to navigate. The Australian approach is more flexible and less bureaucratic, but it depends more heavily on individual school resources and goodwill, meaning experiences can vary more widely. Neither system perfectly serves all students with disabilities, but they reveal different cultural approaches. America emphasizes legal rights and formal processes. Australia emphasizes practical flexibility within a less adversarial framework. Support systems also extend beyond academics to how schools handle discipline and student behavior. And here, the differences become even more stark. Picture a typical Chicago public high school. Metal detectors at entrances, security officers in hallways, surveillance cameras monitoring common areas, and clear backpack policies. Students pass through security screenings each morning, much like airport security. Now picture a comparable Brisbane high school, an open campus where students can leave during lunch breaks, minimal security presence, and gates that are typically only locked during bushfire season or specific safety threats. The statistics tell the story. According to the National Center for Education Statistics 2022 data, 43% of U.S. public schools use security cameras and 58% of high schools have school resource officers, armed police stationed on campus. Australian schools rarely employ police officers as permanent staff and focus instead on restorative justice practices that emphasize mediation and conflict resolution. A 2023 comparative study by the Australian Council for Educational Research found suspension rates in America are 3 times higher than in Australia. American schools are more likely to use exclusionary discipline, removing students from school, while Australian schools emphasize keeping students engaged even when addressing behavioral issues. This difference stems partly from tragically different contexts. School shootings have profoundly shaped American education policy in ways that haven't affected Australia. After the Port Arthur massacre in 1996, Australia implemented strict gun control, and school shootings essentially ceased. America has experienced hundreds of school shootings, leading to security measures that would seem extreme to Australian educators. The result? American schools have securitized in response to legitimate safety concerns, creating environments that can feel restrictive. Australian schools maintain more open environments with different disciplinary philosophies, though they face their own challenges with bullying and student well-being. These safety measures connect to broader questions about school choice and how families access different types of schools. A family in Phoenix uses education savings accounts, ESAs, to fund their child's attendance at a private religious school using taxpayer money. They withdrew their child from public school and now receive roughly $7,000 annually that can be spent on tuition, textbooks, therapy, or online courses. This represents America's rapidly expanding school choice movement. About 90% of American students still attend traditional public schools, but charter school enrollment has grown 300% since 2000, according to the National Alliance for Public Charter Schools 2024 data. Vouchers, ESAs, and charter schools offer alternatives funded by public dollars. Australia presents a different landscape. About 35% of students attend private schools, a much higher proportion than America. These include Catholic schools, 20% of students, and independent private schools, 15%. Here's the key difference. Australian private schools charge tuition, often between $5,000 and $30,000 Australian dollars annually, but they also receive government subsidies to keep costs lower than they would be otherwise. So in America, school choice increasingly means publicly funded alternatives to traditional district schools, with ongoing debate about whether this helps or harms public education. In Australia, the private school sector has existed alongside public schools for generations, with government support for both systems but clear cost differences for families. Neither country has resolved the tension between school choice and educational equity. In America, critics argue that school choice drains resources from traditional public schools serving the neediest students. Supporters say it provides options for families trapped in failing schools. In Australia, critics argue that government subsidies for wealthy private schools exacerbate inequality. Supporters say the subsidies keep private school costs manageable for middle-class families. The takeaway? America is experimenting with new forms of school choice and competition. Australia has long established private and public systems that coexist with different funding arrangements. Beyond how schools are chosen, the actual structure of the school day reveals how teachers spend their time and energy. Meet a typical high school teacher in Ohio. She teaches 5 classes daily, maybe 150 students total across English 9, English 10, and AP Literature courses. She has one 45-minute planning period to grade papers, prepare lessons, respond to parent emails, attend meetings, and handle administrative tasks. When she arrives at 7:15 a.m. and leaves at 4 p.m., she's been on almost constantly. Now meet a teacher in Queensland. He teaches 4 classes, maybe 75 to 100 students total across years 10, 11, and 12 English. He has more non-contact time built into his schedule for preparation, parent communication, professional development, and collaboration with colleagues. His scheduled teaching hours are lower, giving him more time to plan quality lessons. The OECD Teaching and Learning International Survey from 2023 provides the data. American teachers average 27 hours of classroom instruction time weekly. Australian teachers average 19 to 21 hours. The student-to-teacher ratio in America is 16 to 1 nationally. In Australia, it's 13.5 to 1. What does this mean practically? American teachers face higher workloads with larger student numbers and less preparation time. This contributes to burnout and high attrition rates, particularly in the first 5 years of teaching. Australian teachers still face stress and workload challenges, but the structure provides more breathing room. The impact on instruction quality? When teachers have more time to plan, provide detailed feedback, and develop engaging lessons, students benefit. When teachers are stretched thin managing 150-plus students, even the most dedicated professional struggles to give each student adequate attention. This workload difference connects to who chooses teaching as a career and how they're prepared for the profession. Let's look at how these countries prepare their teachers in the first place. A California teacher completed her bachelor's degree in English literature, then enrolled in a 1-year teaching credential program. After passing exams and completing a student teaching placement, she was certified to teach. Total preparation time? About 5 years of higher education, with 1 year specifically focused on teaching. An Australian teacher in Victoria took a different path. She completed a 4-year Bachelor of Education, which integrated subject knowledge with teaching methodology from the beginning. Alternatively, she could have completed a subject degree followed by a 2-year Master of Teaching. Either way, she completed extensive professional experience placements in schools, more than 500 hours, before qualifying. Here's the crucial difference. All Australian teachers must complete accredited initial teacher education programs and register with state-level teaching boards, following standards set by the Australian Institute for Teaching and School Leadership since 2011. The minimum is 4 to 5 years of university-level education specifically designed to prepare teachers. In America, requirements vary dramatically by state. Some allow alternative certification programs that can qualify someone to teach in a matter of weeks or months. The theory is that subject knowledge matters most, and teaching skills can be learned on the job. A 2022 Learning Policy Institute study found Australian teachers enter the profession with an average of 500-plus hours of classroom experience during training, compared to 200 to 400 hours for American teachers. Neither system has solved the teacher shortage crisis both countries face. Australia's stricter entry requirements may ensure better prepared teachers, but can limit the supply of teachers, particularly in rural areas or high-demand subjects. America's flexibility allows faster entry into teaching, but with greater quality variation. The takeaway? Australia maintains stricter, more consistent entry standards across the country. America's flexibility allows diverse pathways into teaching, but with inconsistent preparation quality. Finally, let's look at how these systems prepare students for life after school, because that tells us what each system ultimately values. A Georgia student takes AP courses during junior and senior year, hoping to earn college credit and reduce future tuition costs. She works part-time at a retail store, saving money for college while maintaining her grades. She knows she'll graduate with student loans, but sees college as essential for career prospects. A student in New South Wales takes a different route. While completing year 12, he's also enrolled in TAFE, Technical and Further Education, courses, earning industry certifications in hospitality management. These vocational courses are integrated into his senior secondary education at no additional cost. When he graduates, he'll have his higher school certificate and industry credentials that can lead directly to employment or further study. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics 2023 data, about 70% of Australian students pursue higher education or vocational training after year 12. VET, vocational education and training, is woven into the senior secondary system, offering clear pathways for students who want skilled trade careers rather than traditional university degrees. In America, 62% of high school graduates enroll in college immediately, according to NCES 2023 data. Community colleges exist as more affordable options, and apprenticeship programs are growing, but they're less integrated with the high school system. The dominant narrative remains. College is the primary path to success. The financial burden differs significantly. American student loan debt averages $37,000 at graduation. In Australia, it averages 24,000 Australian dollars, about 16,000 US dollars, and repayment doesn't begin until you're earning 54,000 Australian dollars annually, with payments scaled to income. This reveals different societal values. America emphasizes the college for all ideal, even as many students graduate with significant debt and degrees that don't lead to employment in their field. Australia offers clearer vocational pathways and more affordable higher education, though university spots are competitive and not everyone who wants to attend can. Neither system perfectly prepares all students for the rapidly changing job market. Both struggle with questions about whether they're training students for jobs that will exist in 20 years. But the pathways they've built reflect distinct national philosophies about education's role beyond school. So there you have it, 11 fundamental differences between American and Australian schools. From when the school year starts to how teachers are trained, From who controls curriculum to how students are assessed, these systems operate on surprisingly different assumptions about what education should accomplish and how to accomplish it. But here's what matters most. These differences aren't just bureaucratic variations. They represent fundamentally different philosophies about education's purpose. America's localized, choice-driven system values flexibility, community control, and individual opportunity. It allows innovation and local customization. But it also creates dramatic inequality, where your zip code determines your educational opportunity. It's a system that can be excellent for some students while failing others, depending on circumstances largely beyond their control. Australia's centralized, equity-focused approach ensures baseline quality and consistent standards across vast geographic distances. It provides clearer pathways for students who don't want traditional university education. But it limits local autonomy, and the early specialization can penalize students who discover their passions later. Neither system is perfect. Both countries struggle with teacher retention, achievement gaps, mental health crises among students, and the challenge of preparing young people for a rapidly changing economy. Australia faces questions about school funding formulas and whether its national curriculum is too rigid. America faces stark inequalities and debates about the purpose of public education itself. Understanding these differences helps us see that many education problems we assume are inevitable are actually design choices. Other countries have made different choices and gotten different results. That doesn't mean we should simply copy another nation's system. Education is deeply embedded in cultural values and historical context. But it does mean we can learn from alternatives and make more informed decisions about what we want education to achieve. So here's my question for you. Based on these differences, which elements from each system would you combine to create your ideal education model? Share your reasoning in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious how people from different countries and educational backgrounds view these trade-offs. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.